I initially had this intro written down where it was going to go on this whole like, oh no, it's a GoBot, Transformer ripoff, pee pee poo poo kind of stuff, because people are like that with GoBots, or at least used to be. But then I also remembered after writing, but before hitting record, that we already looked at GoBots recently, so that joke is kind of pointless to do now. So say hello to Stacks, everyone, without the C. Stacks is what the powers that be call a super GoBot, which is shorthand for a bigger robot that doesn't have a head. I'm not entirely joking, but we'll get to that. Stacks here is one of a handful of GoBot toys I actually used to own as a kid. Not this particular Stacks, of course, because the only two figures that survived my post-college purge were my G1 Bumblebee that I've had for almost my entire life and Alternator's Grimlock, for some reason. I don't remember where I initially got Stacks, but it was probably like a flea market or a yard sale or something. What's kind of funny, though, is since the one I originally got was secondhand, he didn't come with his smokestacks, which, I don't know, kind of feels important because his name is literally Stacks. Now, here we are, decades later, actual decades later, and I have Stacks again. But this time I managed to get one with the smokestacks. And at a really good price, too. I paid like $25 for this guy before shipping, which might not be the best deal, I don't know, but it was way better than a lot of the other eBay listings I was looking at, given the condition and the fact that he came with his stacks. But enough backstory. Let's talk about this truck mode. This truck mode that's basically perfect. Like I said in the Puzzler video, that's the one that I did previously that I realized the whole GoBots joke wouldn't really fly because it just did that. Something I really appreciate about older toys like GoBots and early G1 Transformers is how they really nail the alt modes most of the time. Usually at the cost of the robot modes, but still, it's something I can respect considering the age and time period and all that. Now, I don't know exactly what kind of truck Stacks is supposed to be, but this looks like a pretty spot-on long-nosed cab, or whatever the real term is. The proportions look great to my ignorant layman eyes, and about the only detail omission that really stands out is the lack of any molded doors. Which is a bit weird, but there are no molded doors. But there are lights and horns molded up top, plenty of chrome all over the place. It's held up surprisingly well despite being almost as old as I am. And I like the simple but effective white, yellow, and black striped sticker detailing. The smokestacks look really nice on there too, which is only slightly annoying when I remember how I went for so long without ever seeing them before. You can remove them if you want, because they're supposed to do that, and if you take them both off, he looks fine without them, but they really do make the truck mode look complete. Of course, not knowing that they're supposed to be there, it didn't exactly look incomplete to me as a kid either. Being a super GoBot, Stacks is pretty substantial when compared to one of the Puzzlers and G1 Bumblebee. Maybe not as big as some of the larger G1 Transformers, but I do kind of wish I could catch a glimpse into some kind of alternate reality where GoBots lasted several more years to see how the designs might have evolved over time. Who knows, maybe in that universe there's a legacy equivalent GoBots line celebrating 40 years and making a Titan-class puzzler. Maybe Masterpiece Stacks, Legacy Crasher, but it actually looks like Crasher. I need to stop because I'm just making myself sad now. Point is, Stacks is a pretty good size. Roughly like a modern Voyager, I guess, but way heavier because like 4/6 of the robot mode height is die-cast. We'll get to that. Right now, actually. But before we super transform this super GoBot, that was terrible, I'm sorry. Got a Ko-fi or Patreon at the end of the video, as well as down in the description. Feel free to check those out if you want to support the channel. Can't imagine why after that terrible segue. Otherwise, typical YouTube stuff of like, comment, share, subscribe, that also works. Now, to transform Stacks, you are going to want to remove the smokestacks first, because they're just not really going to work out if you leave them on, because of how everything transforms. Now, going to take the obvious robot legs here and fold them up, and as you fold them up, you also want to slide them out and bring them around. And I think it's this leg, yeah. This leg, for whatever reason, I don't know what's going on with it, but it likes to stick. And I haven't quite figured out the trick. I just kind of have to wiggle and kind of pull and find just the right angle to kind of get it going. There we go. And then once it's gone, once it's done, can slide it down, bring it around, then flip up the feet. Take the back section here. You want to fold in the wheels and then fold this in. And that sits in the back. Now we actually do need to do just a little bit of adjusting. So now these bits here, they kind of pull up, come down, rotate down, and then you can untab these bits here. There's just a tiny tab in there, and straighten out what becomes the arms. You can also, at this point, take the smokestacks, and you want to have the longer part facing forward, and this just using this bottom piece here, or what is the top here, but like it's like this in vehicle mode. So the bottom tab, that just tabs into the little rectangular hole in the fist. And finally, for the head, you want to pull this up, swing it up, and then kind of slide clicks back a little bit. Like that's forward, and you just want to shift it back. And that this is Stax in his entirety. Stax's transformation is really basic, sure, and I feel like that's to be expected. But there are a couple of little touches I enjoy, like how the legs slide apart a little bit for slightly better proportions, the way the rear wheels tuck in and fold around into the cavity that the legs used to be in, and I like all that clicky sliding the head does to get into position. I would have liked it if the smokestacks could be left alone in robot mode just as an option and possible way to keep them stored, but it's an 80s toy. And that might be why so few Stax figures still have the smokestacks these days. But yeah, the reason it doesn't really work is even if you don't slide the arms back in and just leave them out like this, which looks a little awkward, this is where the smokestacks plug in, and there's just not enough room with these gas canisters here, or gas tanks. And I'm just guessing, but that seems like the kind of thing that could lead to the smokestacks breaking or being removed to make the transformation easier and then getting lost. So yeah, that's my guess as to why so few Stax figures seem to have the weapons when you find them in the wild or on eBay. As for the robot mode itself, dang, I adore this silly thing. Partially because of nostalgia and partially because, look at it, it's just freaking awesome. Stax's robot mode is really just a truck cab flipped onto its grill, balancing on a couple of metal stilts. It's so obvious that this is a truck that is also a robot with no attempts made to hide this, and I love it for that. He's definitely a bit awkward with proportionally scrawny legs, weirdly flat, like very flat and wide arms, and the entire top of a truck cab for a head, but this does work for me. I also think it's kind of funny how this looks so much like a mech suit or something that could be piloted by someone, but it's actually a guy, while so many early G1 Transformers figures are guys that were originally meant to be piloted non-sentient mecha, Diaclone and all that. Though, I also don't know for sure, because this was originally a Machine Robo figure, so I don't know for sure if Stax was a character or a mech suit, but I'm pretty sure the Machine Robo character, I'm pretty sure Machine Robo stuff, I think those were characters and not mecha. So I think my point still stands. I mean, I don't really have a point to make, I just think it's amusing, but I still think it stands. Those legs, that's where pretty much all the diecast is. These things are dense. Even though you can see from the back that they are somewhat hollowed out, but it's great because all that weight being in the lower parts, the figure means he's pretty darn stable. He doesn't really have heels, but he also doesn't really need them. But if you bump him hard enough, he will tilt back, but the weight's doing a lot to keep him from falling over. There's a lot of neat detailing in these stems, too. It's a bit early days basic compared to what we usually get now, but it's good. You got a couple of pistons, wires, or possibly tubing, what may or may not be vents. It's nice and robotic looking stuff. The big chrome panel or whatever it is in his chest, which is tucked inside what's now the head in vehicle mode, is also a cool detail. It maybe feels a little bit like an Optimus Prime that displays his matrix front and center, but I also don't know if this is actually a vital component, so it might be fine. Heck, this could even be chest armor for all I know, but it looks cool. The arms are kind of just planks, if we're being honest. but there is some molded detail in there that helps to keep them from feeling boring. And the silver used in the forearms adds a lot more visual interest as far as I'm concerned. His head, though, is just what I sarcastically said a minute or two ago. It's just the top of the truck cab. There's nothing new revealed here, and it's completely devoid of personality. So why does it also add a ton of character to the figure? This could just be my own misguided nostalgia talking, or me trying to find meaning and interest where there is none, but even though his head and base are basically nothing, I still feel like this look gives the figure oodles of charm. So much that I have to quantify it with scientific terms like oodles. Unfortunately, this bucket of charisma doesn't actually do much. The head can technically slide forward and move down as part of the transformation, but it doesn't turn at all. The arms can rotate, but not all the way around just because of the gas tanks. And there are detents of sort that lock them in specific angles. You can kind of cheat them, but that's weird. And because the figure is so old, they still end up looking pretty droopy. There are no bicep swivels, but you can kind of game the transformation joint to rotate the arms out a little for something that I guess is vaguely reminiscent of dynamism if you squint at it. The elbows are probably the best bit of articulation here. They can go up to 180 because of the transformation if you don't have the guns in there, but they're also detented, so your options are what approximates straight out, 90 degrees, or bent all the way in, or almost all the way in if you have the guns in there. And the legs exist. That's it. They just exist. You can't move them in any meaningful way other than sliding them close together, I guess, if you want to make it look like Stax is waiting to use the bathroom. And they can move back a bit if you want to try and make it look like he's walking, but that's very, very unstable. I guess you can play with the joints a little bit to angle them out very slightly. Yeah. Point the toes at your own peril, though. You know, as dinky as the smokestack pistols look, I actually love them too. They're so simple, just tubes with some rings around them, but dang it, these do also manage to pull off sci-fi gun in a really basic and charming way. This sort of makes me annoyed about not knowing about or having his smokestacks before. As much as I've enjoyed and continue to enjoy basic stacks, the addition of the blasters really does complete his look. Stack's size is, somewhat surprisingly, about the same in robot mode as it was in the alt mode. Roughly Voyager, maybe a little shorter, but also significantly heavier. Unfortunately, I don't have any other super GoBots on hand to put next to him, so I can't say for sure if this is about how big they all are, but I did used to have Psycho, the future car-looking one, and from what I remember, they're about the same. I should probably reacquire Psycho at some point, too. But yeah, as I've been saying, Stax is a super GoBot, and so is pretty decently sized. Of course, he's much shorter and lighter than Puzzler, but Puzzler is also 6 dudes in a cohesive humanoid pile. Stax is just one guy. One basic, bland, adorable, characterful guy. This has got to be obvious by now, but I love Stax, and I'm super glad to have him back. And with his guns. Not just because of the nostalgia, but because Bandai, who created the original machine robo design that Tonka imported, had the audacity to turn the question, what if a truck stood up into a physical toy? And it works. Honestly, between this and Puzzler, I've started feeling the GoBots pull. I might have to get some more in the near-ish future, particularly Loco, because then I can do a side-by-side with the Action Toys version of Steam Robo, which we saw earlier, and also Crasher, because Crasher freaking rules. But for now, all I want to see is you telling me what you think of Stax here. Whatever your thoughts, feel free to chime in down below. I always enjoy hearing from you all. Thank you everybody for watching, and I promise we'll be getting back to Hasbro Transformers in the next video. Technically.